Hello everyone and welcome to my F1 24 game settings. This has been highly requested and we're going to jump into it here today. I'm going to show you my wheel settings and my camera settings. Everything will have timestamps down below, guys, so go to the part of the video that interests you the most. But before you go away, I want to mention one thing. The handling is very unpopular in this game. However, there is a new handling model on the way. There's no time scheduled for when it's going to arrive, but rest assured I'll do an updated video for the wheel settings if I change them when the patch eventually drops, and I'll update all the info in this video, the links down below in the comments and description. So like and subscribe and let's get into it, starting off with my wheel settings. Now I want to mention one thing before we start. These are not meant to be the fastest settings available. I reckon there's maybe faster options out there. The idea behind this is to make the driving experience a bit more manageable. So, to make the game feel a bit more like F1 23 and a bit more manageable overall. So, with that said, let's get into it. Now, I have my preset ready to go for my Fanatec Club Sport DD+, which we'll get into the software firmware settings after this. Starting off with calibration. Now, I tried something new this year, an experimental, setting. Now, steering rate, I think it's actually a setting for the pad in terms of the joystick and the inputs, but I decided to try it, and I'm not sure if it's placebo or not, but for me, I get basically a better feeling on my wheel. Now, the steering rate, as you can see on the right side, basically means, the response time and how sharp the kind of initial movement is going to be is what percentage you apply. So I've gone for the lowest to basically kind of make the car and the wheel all a bit slower and a bit more delayed, which basically gives you a bit more of a consistent input. Also, I've paired that up with steering linearity and also brake linearity. Now, the concept of linearity is, if you had a linear line, you're basically putting a curve into it to kind of, have a delayed first response, and then it kind of really picks up at the end. So with that in mind, for the steering, having just 1% just adds that little bit of delay in the first 25-30 degrees of rotation, where the car doesn't feel so sharp on the nose, and then it kind of picks up in the second part of the rotation movement. And then the same concept applies for brake linearity, where the brake curve isn't a straight line. I've been struggling massively with the lockups in this game, so I find 25 is actually the default setting in the game. I tried 10, I tried 0, and I ended up falling back on 25 because for me this works pretty well and basically gives you a bit of a delayed brake curve, so the initial part isn't so harsh, so hopefully you don't lock up as much. And then we go to vibration and force feedback. Now, I will admit, I'm still kind of trying to find what I like, but I've fallen on these settings so far. So vibration and feedback strength on 70, which is default. 60, 65, a bit lower could be quite nice. I feel like any higher than 70 is a no-go in this game. And then the effects I have very low, very low. I had pit stop on 10 to basically try and see if I could feel, certain things in the pit stop phase, but I haven't really felt much. And then I have just, 5% off track, 5% on track, and 1% rumble strip. I want just very minimal feeling of those elements, but I don't want it disrupting my driving pattern and, me trying to be consistent with the game. And then the wheel damper by default is on 1, essentially a bit of weight in the wheel in the kind of initial stage, so the wheel isn't completely light and doesn't fly out of your hands. Now, the wheel rotation is interesting. By default, the game has 400. I've put it to 360, which was the default in the previous games, and back then I ran 300. So I've brought my wheel rotation up compared to the last game, but I'm still technically under the baseline value of what the game recommends. Now, 360 for me gives me the perfect balance, because basically the wheel isn't going to be super sharp on the nose, but you also have a full turn-in circle, so it kind of aligns pretty well. I think there's two ways of going about this. I think if you run 360, you want to run my settings in the calibration. If you run the calibration settings on 0, then I'd probably up this to around 400 to kind of give you that more delayed and consistent response. So I wanted to show you guys my Fanatec wheel settings for the game. I have essentially copy and pasted the preset from F1 23 to F1 24. There is no F1 24 preset as it stands on the Fanalab software, so for now not much has changed between the games, so you can basically run a 23 and make some car adjustments. Now, overall, in terms of what I run for this game, I run advanced and I have 360 rotation, 60 on force feedback strength, which is default. And then I think everything here is default besides, I believe, the spring effect strength and the game damper effect, which I've turned all the way off. I think that's pretty much it. Everything else is exactly how it comes. And personally, because I'm not on a rig, I'm on a desk, I run 15% brake falls. If you're on a rig, you could probably run higher, but my chair moves, so I need very little falls to basically not move my chair. Now, another thing I want to mention really quickly, I get a lot of comments about, is my audio settings. Now, I run the onboard mix set to driver. A lot of people, most people would usually run broadcast, but I run driver. I prefer the kind of first person sound. I prefer the depth, the bassiness and the groan of the engine compared to broadcast and cinematic. I think for me, it adds a bit more of a realistic sound and a bit more of that depth and bass, which we don't really get from the game sounds, you know, by default with broadcast mode. So for me, this is the setting that everybody asks me about, you know, why does my game sound different? This is why. Now for this one, PC only, so graphic settings and what I run to make my game look good and run good. Again, if you're on console, you won't have this available, but basically I run video mode. You can see resolution 2560 by 1440, my monitor's native resolution. Aspect ratio on automatic, VSync off, of course, to basically have, you know, next to nothing on the response time. VSync interval, auto or 1 is basically the same thing. I just set to auto to basically make sure we have no issues. Refresh rate, the highest my monitor goes, 164 Hz. And then of course the FPS cap on 59 or 60. Either way, it has to be done because this year, if you're competing, that's the way to go. Also, filtering 16%, and then I run NVIDIA DLSS and DLLA for anti-aliasing or anti-aliasing, depending on what you want to call it, to basically have the game run super smooth, sharpness on 50, and then everything else is off. As for my advanced graphics, I basically have everything on the high preset, but I have ray tracing turned off because it's super consuming on your system. And then I have an NVIDIA graphics card, so I have my NVIDIA settings on, and also ambient occlusion. There are settings depending on your graphics card. So I have HBAO Plus, which is for NVIDIA cards, but if you have an AMD, a SAO or AMD Fidelity FX Cacao is going to be the setting for you, but I run HBAO Plus. Now, one thing before we get into the camera settings is going to be the on-screen display. Now, the HUD is customizable. The beauty of being on PC is that you can basically download and overwrite or copy and paste templates. Now, of course, you can fully customize this, but if you're on PC, I will have my own template linked down below. So if you're on PC, I'll show you now how to install it. So this is how you install my custom OSD or custom HUD on PC. So you download the file I'll leave linked down below. You then go to Documents. Within Documents, you scroll down and you're going to go to My Games. And then you want to look for F124, go into there and then go into HUD Customization. And then once you're in there, overwrite the files or make a backup of your own ones and then put mine in, whatever you prefer, but this is where the file goes. But there we go, guys. I'll now leave you with camera settings and music. Pause the video when it suits you the most and use the settings you wish to copy. Anyway, guys, like, subscribe. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you soon.